Hey everyone, this is WobblyWallaby. Today I'm going to share my thoughts and build of Saitama in the re-release of the One Punch Man collaboration in Ragnarok Mobile. I now use Saitama in many more PvE instances than before, so I'll show you my build. It did replace my Khalitzburg on things like Ghost Palace. Now Saitama has always been amazing for hitting high numbers. For instance, you can hit 2.1 billion damage against these bosses in NIF. And if you're into MVP hunting, Saitama is the best. You can one-shot APOC MVPs and you have super movement speed as well. So why is Saitama so insane now? On the re-release, workout not losing stacks when attacking monsters is insane. Also you get 3 at a time now, so you can get the buffs much faster than before. Before you had to do 1 at a time. You can also pair this with Holy Glorious Punch, so you get 5 stacks. This was also added in the re-release. And then you can switch back to Titan for an insane boost in Vit and Strength. Next, in Supreme Power level 7, Concentration Battle does 50% more damage to the target and you take 50% less damage from the target too. This is great for more damage and for survivability. I feel like it's very strong in these new Ghost Palace instances where it is single target and the bosses have insane reductions. Furthermore, with the Cobalt Leader card, you don't have to pop potions non-stop, which was the case when I went Khalitzburg. However, the biggest downside to Saitama is his inability to deal with mobs. You get a bit of splash, but is nowhere near as consistent of an AoE compared to other classes like Ronin or Khalitzburg. So for Oracle Dungeon, White Star Airship, and Constellation Tower, I still use Ronin or Khalitzburg. Now, here's a reminder of the critical stats you should strive for in various instances. Please note for Ignore Defense, Enforcement of Justice does ignore defense, so you don't need it there. However, due to the HP shield that bosses have in instances, it's actually the successive attack that does a ton of damage over time, and that does require Ignore Defense. Also, Titan Tier 5 also gives 30% Ignore Defense against large sized monsters, but I personally still aim for 200% Ignore Defense because there are some tough monsters that are medium sized. I usually try to get towards the ideal stats as I put my build together, and with that said, let's begin showing the build. First, for offhand, I use Dragonbone Shield for the physical damage increase. The ideal enchant here is Armor Breaking for the penetration percentage. For a card, I use Ancient Artifact User card for the damage to monsters, and also the additional penetration as well. Next, for armor, I use Cursed Armor for the Ignore Defense. This is required since I use the Cobalt Leader card a ton, so I need the Ignore Defense. There's also the Damage to Large Sized Monster random attribute, which helps with activating the Minoris card effect. Now for ideal enchant, Morale is great for Ignore Defense. For card, I use the Molten Colossus card for damage to MVP and mini monsters. If you have enough Ignore Defense, then you should be using other Short Patrol for more elemental damage. This is the stat I'm lacking right now, which is why I'm using Cursed Armor. Next for garment, I use Leader's Pauldron for the Ignore Defense and skill damage. For ideal enchant, it is the physical damage increase. For card, I use Golden Flame King card for damage to MVP and mini monsters. Next for footgear, I use the Dragon Slayer War Boots for the attack percentage and penetration percentage. The ideal enchant here is physical damage increase. For card, I use the Flute Player Star card for more movement speed. This comes in handy if you're boss hunting, but also if you have more movement speed, you get more final damage for your Enforcement of Justice due to the Agility of Hero passive skill. Next for accessories, I use the Fire accessories for the fire attack percentage. Most instances I use either fire or water. For ideal enchant, Sharp Blade or the physical damage increase is the best. For accessory card, I use a few. I use the Scarecrow card for Lord of House of Cards in Oracle Dungeon, the Dragon in Museum Floor 1, and the Dragon in PSR. Next I use the Centaporin card against King Clown in Oracle Dungeon, Rune Master in TTL Floor 4, Sacre in Dark Finale, and any time a Saint is dark converting a target. Next I use the Malguai card against Sorrow and Worry Polymer in TTL Floor 3, Late King's Chest Knight in Museum Floor 2, and Sea Spirit Totem in Isles Floor 2. Next I use the Ultraman card against Lord of House of Cards in Oracle Dungeon, Demonic Overseer in Isles Floor 3, Kane in Palace the Ghost, and Terratonos in Dark Finale. For other bosses, I will use Moonlight Tendrillion Star card for the skill damage or the Liu Mao Shin card as well. Ideally, I do want to get the Devil Governor card one day for the amazing skill damage, and the final damage as well. Next for weapon, I use Titan for the insane damage to large monsters bonus. Many bosses are large, so it does very well. The ideal enchant here is Morale for ignore defense. I also swap in the Holy Glorious Punch tier 5 just to get the 5 stacks of workout, then I swap back to Titan, so for Holy Glorious Punch the refine doesn't matter. Next for card, I use the Cobalt Leader card for the life gain. You get this with doing the successive attack for high survivability. Then I use the Drake Star card for dealing with large bosses. Also, you don't need to deal with weapon penalties since knuckles do 50% less damage to large sized monsters. Next for boss hunting, I do swap out the Cobalt Leader card for Menorah Star card since I want to one-shot the boss and I don't care much for gaining life. Next for headwear, I use the Telebaby for the damage to large sized monsters. Especially with Cobalt Leader, I need a nice activator for the Menorah's card effect. For enchant, attack is great. For card, I use the Machine Dragon Wing card for damage to MVP and mini monsters. Next for face, I use the Winter Crown for the skilled damage. For ideal enchant, Morale is good for ignore defense. Next for mouth, I use the Frozen Fruit to get more penetration percentage. The ideal enchant here is attack. Next for back, Chicken Axe is great for damage to monsters and also the damage taken debuff to targets. The ideal enchant here is Morale. Next is It's Too Late for the skilled damage for your tail. The ideal enchant here is Sharp Blade or physical damage increase. Next is my shadow equipment. For offhand, I use the Skeleton Bracer primarily for the tier 5 effect to have its anti-death. You can also trigger the 50% extra damage from successive attack. Now for armor, Shinehold's armor is great for the extra raw attack that scales off your HP. Next for garment, I use the White Juice Manteau for the skill damage and ignore defense. For footgear, I use St. Mary's Cloth Shoes for the attack percentage. For the accessory, I use the Cat Paw for the penetration percentage and damage to undead monsters. For my second accessory, I use Hermit's Bundle for the melee damage percentage. For the offensive Oracle Mirror, I use Bill for the extra damage to MVP and mini monsters. For defensive Oracle Mirror, I use Death Cat Armor for the silence and stun resist. Next for Relic, I use Fire Era C to convert the target to demi-human. This is the best PvE relic. If you don't have this, Lord of Vain is a more semi-free-to-play friendly alternative. Next is memory equipment. First is Sakurai's Legendary Memory, which is for accessories and weapon. Ideally for attack, you have physical attack plus 2% or ignore defense plus 2%. Next for defense, I think wind, earth, water, and fire damage taken minus 2% is pretty useful in PvE. Next for special, Cursed Armor Break is fantastic. When defense is ignored, you get 3%, up to 6%, and then up to 15% final damage increase, depending on how many Sakurai's Legendary Memories you have with this special attribute. Next is Sakurai's Legendary Memory 2, which is for armor, garment, and footgear. Ideally, you have the attack which is physical attack plus 2%, or ignore defense plus 2%. For defense, I picked M-Def percentage plus 2% since this works quite well with Ronin or with Ruin Master. Next for special, I like Nature's Blessing. When taking only wind, earth, water, or fire damage, reduce the corresponding damage taken by those elements by 5 to 10 to 25% for 3 seconds. This is great for survivability. Next is Memory of Wartime Starlight. This is for armor, garment, and footgear. Ideally, I like the attack to be physical attack plus 2% or ignore defense plus 2%. For defensive, the M-Def plus 2% is great, again useful for Ronin or Ruin Master. And for special, the Boundary Breaker is quite well. The attack of all debuff skills plus 2%, up to 4%, and finally 10% depending on how many you have. And when attacking a target with debuffs, increases physical damage and magic damage by 2, then up to 4, and then up to 10% for 5 seconds. This is a great way to deal with debuff targets such as some bosses that don't have the control, and also for some mobs. Next are attributes. I invested in strength and agility first. Remember, agility does increase your final damage for your enforcement of justice. Then summon dex to hit 500 hit. You can also increase your hit beyond 500. Some people do go for 520 to avoid missing. And then the rest is into Vit. Next for stats, I have 57,000 attack, 56.9% penetration, 42% skill damage increase, 196.5% ignore defense, and 90% fire damage. Next is a breakdown of my critical stats. For 56.85% penetration, I think it could be a bit higher. I do want it closer to 70%. If I did use a combustible knife in my Oracle Mirror, I think it would help. Frozen Fruit definitely adds a large amount as well, which is why I like that gacha. Next for skill damage, I have 42%. The Xanabia card would help me a lot to get towards 50%, and that is the card I'm currently saving for. Next is Ignore Defense. I'm at 196.5%. If I swapped in a few more equipment memory to use Ignore Defense instead of attack percentage, then it would help a lot. Ideally, I would have 200% Ignore Defense no matter what size target. The Tier 5 Effective Titan does do 30% Ignore Defense against large only, but not all monsters are large, most notably Sacre and Dark Finale, and also the Rook and Museum Floor 2. Next for elemental damage, which I usually use either fire or water, you can see how I achieved 90%. It could be higher with other Shore Patrol, which I would swap in if I had more morale and chance. Next for skills, on my manual bar I have Workout, which is what I cast before a battle and during a battle if it runs out. Enforcement of Justice if I want to cast this manually for some burst. Fast Move, which you should be casting before hitting a boss or for boss hunting. Also, more movement speed gives you more final damage for Enforcement of Justice, so it's a nice buff as well. Then I have Jump, not that useful for PvE. In many instances you can't use Jump anyways, but it's quite useful for PvP. Then there's Concentration Battle, cast this on your target to do more damage and to also take less damage from them. And Successive Attack, in case you're boss hunt and you need a follow up in case you can't one-shot. Next on Auto, I have Enforcement of Justice, Successive Attack, and Auto Attack. Auto Attack has a chance to proc Enforcement of Justice, so it's definitely worth adding in there. Now if you boss hunt and plan to only one-shot bosses, only put Enforcement of Justice on Auto, and if you can't one-shot, then click Successive Attack afterwards as a follow-up. Next are Advanced Ruins. First is Powerful Suppressed Ruin. Of all the ruins here, this is the one that would probably reroll to get the highest possible first line. Of course you do need the second line in order to activate the 7 out of 7 core hero passive. Next is Limit Break Star Ruin. The extra movement speed is a nice to have. Next is Power Emergent Star Ruin. This is great for PvP, but not that useful for PvE. Next is Exercise Secret Ruin. The extra agi is nice. Next is Undefeated Position. And of course Jump can't be used much in PvE, so definitely don't try to reroll for this, it's fine as it is. Finally is Warm Up Star Ruin. This is also for PvP as well, you don't really have to care for PvE. Next are Arcane Ruins. I use White Blade Ruin for more damage to a single enemy. Luckily, for most bosses they're often by themselves, so you can definitely do a lot of damage with this. Then next is War Preparedness Ruin for the Self Shield, and then the Spirit Ruin, which is nice for not running out of SP. Next are foods. For B meals, Agi B provides more damage, Fit B provides more survivability, Strength B also provides more damage, and Dex B provides more hit. You can also use the Slow Attack or Rapid Alloys to have more raw attack. The Wind, Earth, Fire, Water, Mastery, and Controlling Alloys provide more elemental damage. Next is the Expert Precision Stone. This helps you overcome the weapon penalty. You have a 50% damage penalty to large sized monsters with Knuckles, so you need either the Drake Star card or LB's Weapon Perfection to get past this, otherwise eat this alloy or your damage will be horrible. And finally 6 stacks of the Pronto Royal Salad for anti-death. And finally here's some more gameplay to show how to use the various skills and some final thoughts. You start off by switching to the Holy Glorious Punch in your item bar, then you do 2 push-ups, and get 5 stacks of workout. Then switch back to Titan. Then do Fast Move. You could even mount if you'd like as well to get more move speed. Then cast Concentration Battle and hit the boss with auto. With the Cobalt Leader card, the survivability is great since you can get life like crazy. You can also easily survive without using too many potions, which is what I really like. This is probably one of the more AFK friendly classes in the game, and it's much less intense compared to Ronin or Ruin Master, who need to do the Ymir MDef switching periodically. When workout expires, you can do workout again to get 5 stacks. The stacks last for 120 seconds, so you definitely don't have to do this that often. You can take down bosses fairly well. I think the debuff for the damage reduction that you get from the powerful suppressed rune helps a lot. In addition, you get these huge damage modifiers, so you can solo bosses quite well. Saitama is also able to melt legend bosses, such as those in Museum or Isles. Here you can see I deal with the dragon. I start off switching to the Holy Glorious Punch weapon, then I do my 2 push-ups, then I switch back to Titan, and then I run towards the enemy and hit them. I also do concentration battle just before. Now Saitama makes Museum and Isles look very easy, and for messing around with other off-meta classes, clearing Isles 1-3 and Museum 1-2 isn't as bad as it used to be. I think these days the biggest problems is dealing with Ghost Palace, Dark Finale, and PSR. Some classes just take forever to clear them, but luckily Saitama is fantastic for that. I love using Saitama in Ghost Palace and Dark Finale because he's able to carry these, whereas I'm unable to do that before with Khalitzburg. Probably because for Khalitzburg I kept dying, and there wasn't a lot of survivability. I'd be eating potions like crazy. Here Saitama is almost like AFK. Once you get going, you can definitely just leave it and not move around too much. I take down Kane in about 3 minutes, that's definitely faster than my Khalitzburg. Now I think the re-release of Saitama has been great. The buffs are fantastic, and I do think he's S tier now for PvE. Previously, I was a bit unsure whether he should be S tier or A tier since he wasn't that great in instances, but I think now I've been convinced that he's actually really good for instances, and I've actually switched over to him quite a bit. But again, he's horrible versus mobs, so he won't be able to do everything, but I guess he does have to have some sort of downside, otherwise he'd be too overpowered. So if you haven't gotten Saitama yet, make sure you get him before the event finishes at the end of March, and if you had him before but don't use him, definitely give him a try. His buffs made him significantly stronger, and I think you'll really enjoy playing him. Well, that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Here's a video that I'd recommend, and if you want to know which classes to play, check out this playlist over here.